Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, things might get a little, well, creepy. We're going to be exploring this concept of digital slavery.
Yeah.
Yeah, you heard that right. We're basically asking, are we all just unknowingly feeding this massive AI system? Our source material for this deep dive is a fascinating, if a bit unsettling episode of the podcast Alternative World. And right out of the gate, they hit you with some seriously thought-provoking questions. Like, is our online data actually a form of currency that we're spending without even realizing it?
It really makes you stop and think.
Right. And how did the internet, which started as this open space for information sharing, turn into
Yeah.
this data-driven world where everything we do online is tracked and analyzed?
Yeah, the source does a really good job of tracing that evolution. In the early days of the internet, it really was about access to information, connecting with people. But like everything, it needed a way to fund itself to keep running.
Advertising.
Exactly. And at first, it seemed harmless enough, right? But looking back, it was like opening Pandora's box. That was the first step towards this data-driven economy that we're all tangled up in now.
Totally. And it's not just about ads anymore, is it? I mean, the source makes this comparison between data and oil. It's saying that our online activity, every click, every search, that's the raw material.
Yeah.
And it's being refined into these insights about us, about our behavior, our preferences.
It is an interesting analogy.
Kind of freaky when you think about it. Like, all of that data is fueling this whole digital machine.
Right, and it raises the question, like, who actually owns all of this data? Did we ever really consent to giving it away?
That's what really got to me, too. You know, those terms of service agreements, the ones that are 1,000,000 pages long. I don't know about you, but I just click agree and move on.
Oh, yeah, me too. Who has the time to actually read all of that?
Just seriously, is that really informed consent?
Yeah.
Do we even have any idea what we're agreeing to?
Honestly, it's a huge gray area. I mean, even if you tried to read those agreements, they're written in this dense legal jargon that's practically impossible to understand.
Exactly. So this whole idea that we're making conscious, informed choices about our data.
Yeah. Debatable at best.
Okay, so now we throw AI into the mix. And the source makes the argument that AI algorithms aren't just, suggesting things we might like. They're actually using all this data to shape our desires, to predict how we'll behave, and then influence our choices.
That's where things start to get a bit unnerving.
Right.
Think about it. They're not just showing us targeted ads. They're trying to understand our vulnerabilities, our deepest desires even. And then they use that knowledge to kind of nudge us in certain directions.
So every time I'm scrolling through my social media feed,
Mm-hmm.
there's basically this AI that knows more about me than I do,
Mm.
deciding what I see, how I feel. That's a lot of power.
It is a lot of power.
And honestly, it feels kind of manipulative.
It raises some big questions about free will and autonomy, doesn't it? Like, are we really making genuine choices? Or are we just responding to these carefully crafted prompts that are designed to get a specific reaction from us?
And think about what that means for things like, news and politics. If algorithms are filtering what we see online, how can we be sure we're getting a balanced perspective? Are we all just living in these echo chambers?
That's a legitimate concern for sure.
It all goes back to this imbalance of power. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
These tech companies control so much of the information we see.
Yeah.
They're shaping our digital reality.
And it's not always clear that they have our best interests in mind.
That's the thing. The source makes a really interesting point. We, the users, we generate all this incredibly valuable data, but we don't get anything for it. It's like we're the unpaid labor force of the digital economy.
That's a great way to put it.
These companies are making billions off of our data, but what do we get out of the deal?
It really makes you question what the value of our data is and whether we're getting a fair exchange for it. Is the convenience, the entertainment we get from these platforms really worth the cost of our privacy, our autonomy?
And as if all of that wasn't enough to make you paranoid, the source brings up the future of AI. They talk about biometric data, things like facial recognition, even brainwave activity being collected and analyzed. I mean, that's getting into some seriously personal territory.
No, it's wild.
Imagine a world where your thoughts and emotions can be tracked. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie, but the technology is already developing.
It's moving fast. And then there's the whole issue of deepfakes and synthetic media.
Don't even get me started on deepfakes.
If AI can create realistic videos of anyone saying or doing anything, how can we trust anything we see online anymore?
It feels like we're losing our grip on reality.
I know, right? We're entering this era where distinguishing fact from fiction is becoming increasingly difficult, and that has implications for everything from our personal relationships to like you said, the political landscape.
So we're facing some pretty serious challenges here. Tell me this source offers some solutions. Please tell me there's some hope.
Well, they do talk about some potential solutions like raising awareness and advocating for stricter regulations, things like that.
Okay, good. We need to cling to some hope here.
Yeah, we definitely need to understand how these systems work and what's really at stake. We need stronger regulations to protect our privacy and force these companies to be more transparent about what they're doing with our data.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
We can't just trust them to do the right thing. Maybe we also need to, step back and rethink our relationship with technology in general. Are we too reliant on these platforms? Too willing to just hand over our data without even thinking about the consequences?
That's a great point. We need to become more conscious about how we use technology. We need to demand systems that prioritize our well-being, that actually give us more control over our data and our online experiences.
It's not about rejecting technology. It's about using it in a way that benefits us, instead of the other way around. Wow, this is a lot to process. But before we spiral into an existential crisis, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dive into some potential alternatives, some ways we can reclaim our digital agency. Stick around.
So, it's easy to get kind of overwhelmed by all of this, but the Alternative World episode, they do offer some glimmers of hope. It's not all doom and gloom.
Okay, good. Because I was starting to feel a little hopeless, to be honest. Are there any alternatives? Is there anything we can actually do to push back against this?
Yeah, for sure. One idea that the source really emphasizes is exploring, alternative platforms. Imagine social networks or search engines that were built on ethical data practices from the ground up. What if there were platforms that actually compensated you for your data or gave you real control over how it's used?
Okay, that sounds pretty amazing in theory, but is it even realistic? I mean, the platforms we use now, they're so convenient, they're so ingrained in our lives. Can anything really compete with that?
That's a valid point. It's a huge challenge, no doubt. But, the source also talks about the potential of decentralized systems. Basically, it's about shifting the power away from these giant tech companies and distributing it among the users.
Decentralized systems. I feel like that's one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot, but I'm not sure I fully understand it. Can you break that down for me? How would that even work?
Sure. So think of it like this. Instead of your data being stored and controlled by a single company, it's spread across a network, kind of like a peer-to-peer system. You have actual ownership of your data, and you decide who gets to access it and how it's used.
So it's like cutting out the middleman, taking back control. I like the idea, but honestly, it sounds kind of like a pipe dream. How would these decentralized platforms even get off the ground? Wouldn't they need massive infrastructure and resources?
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. But there are already projects and initiatives out there that are exploring these ideas. One technology that's often mentioned in this context is blockchain.
Okay, blockchain, another one of those buzzwords. I feel like I hear it everywhere, but I'm still not sure I totally get it. Can you give me the ELI 5 version? Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Okay, so imagine a digital ledger, like a record book, that's distributed across a whole network of computers. Every transaction, every piece of data is recorded on this ledger in a really secure and transparent way. And it's incredibly difficult to tamper with because there's no single point of control.
So how does that apply to these decentralized platforms we were talking about?
Well, you can use blockchain technology to create platforms where users have true ownership and control of their data. Think of a social network built on blockchain. Your posts, your connections, all of that data would be yours, and you would get to decide who sees it, how it's used.
So instead of Facebook or Twitter owning all of our data, we would actually own it ourselves.
Exactly. And because it's decentralized, there's no single company that can censor you, manipulate your feed, or sell your data without your consent.
That's kind of mind-blowing. But, let's be real for a second. Most people are pretty comfortable with the platforms they use now. They're convenient. They're where our friends and family are already hanging out. How do we convince people to switch to something new? Something that might feel more complicated, more unfamiliar?
That's the big challenge, isn't it? I think a big part of it comes down to awareness. The more people understand the potential downsides of the current system, the data collection, the lack of control, the more likely they are to be open to alternatives.
So we need to get the word out. We need to explain to people how their data is being used, why it matters, and what the potential risks are.
Exactly. And it's not about fear-mongering or anything like that. It's about empowering people with knowledge so they can make informed choices about the technology they use.
It's like anything else. Education is key. The more we understand, the better equipped we are to make good decisions.
Absolutely. And, it's not just about individual awareness either. We need systemic change as well.
You mean like regulation?
Exactly. We need to push for stronger laws that actually protect our digital rights, that promote transparency, and that hold these tech companies accountable.
So like data privacy laws, regulations around AI development and use, things like that.
Right. We can't just rely on these companies to self-regulate. We need governments to step in and create a legal framework that ensures that these technologies are being developed and used ethically and responsibly.
That makes sense. But, realistically, how do we get there? These tech companies are incredibly powerful. Do you really think governments are willing to stand up to them?
It's a tough battle, for sure. But I do think public pressure can make a difference. The more people demand change, the harder it will be for governments to ignore the issue.
So it's about raising awareness, educating ourselves, and making our voices heard. Voting with our wallets, supporting companies that align with our values, and pushing for systemic change.
Exactly. It's a multifaceted approach, and it's not going to happen overnight, that's for sure. But I do think it's crucial that we start having these conversations now, that we start taking action because the stakes are high.
The source makes this point about technology being a tool. It's not inherently good or bad. It's all about how we use it.
Yeah.
And right now, it feels like we're letting it use us.
I agree. We need to reclaim our agency, to remember that we have the power to shape technology, to direct it towards goals that benefit humanity.
That question from the Alternative World episode keeps coming back to me. Will we be the masters of our digital destinies, or will we become slaves to the systems we've created?
It's such a powerful image, and it really gets to the heart of the matter. And, the answer isn't predetermined. It really depends on the choices we make, the actions we take, starting today.
So we've talked about the problem, we've explored some potential solutions, both on an individual level and a systemic level. But I want to go a little deeper on this whole idea of, like, AI manipulation.
Yeah.
This source mentions that it's not just about our data being used, it's about our thoughts and emotions being manipulated. That's a whole other level of scary, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit unsettling to think about, isn't it? That AI could be used to, predict and influence our emotions. It's definitely something we need to be really aware of, especially as AI, gets more sophisticated.
It's almost like the more powerful AI becomes, the more vulnerable we become.
Exactly. Like the ability to tap into human behavior, it's incredibly powerful. But it's a double-edged sword, right? It can be used for good or for bad.
So how do we protect ourselves?
Yeah.
Like, how do we make sure AI is used ethically? Especially when it comes to, something as personal as our thoughts and feelings.
That's the million-dollar question. There's no easy answer, but I think it starts with acknowledging the potential risks. We need to be having these open and honest conversations about, how this technology could be misused and what safeguards need to be put in place to prevent that.
Okay, but let's get practical here. What can we do, like on an individual level, to protect ourselves from this kind of manipulation?
Well, for starters, we can be more critical of the information we're consuming online. Don't just passively absorb everything you see and hear. Question the source. Think about potential biases and look for different perspectives.
So basically, don't let the algorithms do our thinking for us.
Right. We need to stay engaged, stay informed, and be willing to challenge the information we're being fed.
And remember, you can always just disconnect, right? Step away from the screen, take a break from social media, engage with the real world.
Exactly. It's so easy to get swept up in this digital whirlwind that we forget to actually live our lives. It's important to maintain that balance.
Hit the reset button.
Exactly.
I like that.
I think ultimately it comes down to fostering a culture of critical thinking and digital literacy. We need to equip ourselves and future generations with the skills and knowledge to navigate this complex digital world safely and responsibly.
So it's not just about the technology. It's about education and awareness. It's about a fundamental shift in how we think about our relationship with the digital world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about empowering ourselves to be active participants in shaping this digital world rather than, passive consumers being shaped by it.
I think that's a great place to leave it. We've covered so much ground today: the evolution of the internet, the potential risks of AI, the importance of awareness and regulation, and exploring alternative models. And honestly, it feels like we've just scratched the surface.
I agree. This is a conversation that needs to continue. And I really encourage everyone listening to, do your own research, explore these ideas further, and join the conversation about how we can build a digital future that truly serves humanity.
Absolutely. And before we go, I just want to bring it back to that thought-provoking question from the Alternative World episode. Will we be the masters of our digital destinies? Or will we become slaves to the systems we've created? It really stuck with me.
It's such a powerful question, and it really sums up everything we've been talking about, doesn't it? And you know what? The answer isn't set in stone. It really depends on the choices we make, the actions we take, starting today.
So listeners, we leave you with that challenge. Explore these ideas, continue the conversation, and make your voice heard. The future of the digital world is in our hands. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.